Welcome back to part 2 of learning how to create a spreadsheet so you can disaggregate data. So we're going to pick up where we left off before. So now what I'd like to do is create a column for the number of students who scored greater than 70% on their test. So I'm going to create a column in the double A column. I'm going to put the value of greater than, and then the number 70 and the percent sign. And so now what I'm going to do in order to designate any score of 70 or above, I'm going to scan the percent column and I'm going to assign the value of 1 to indicate a score that's 70 or above. And I can just quickly do this by looking at it. It's not very difficult because my data set is not very big. So there we have those set out that way. All right, so I'm going to continue with the process of highlighting. Before I do that, let me go ahead and assign if I wanted to put a 0 in the column to indicate anything below, I could, but really here, we're only interested in those that are at the 70% or above, so I'm going to leave these blank. And even if I were to sort the cells and I indicated I wanted to sort by this, it would still separate those blanks from those with the ones. So it's not a problem. So let's just go ahead and take this information, let's highlight it, and now we're going to put the black fill, we're going to assign the color, we're going to center while everything's highlighted, and now I go to border, I click on the border, all borders, and I click, because I had already selected the line color to be white, there you go, that was all it was to it. So we've taken care of that column. So now what we want to do is move to the next section where we are going to calculate the sum for each individual question. So now we're going to work, instead of across, we're going to work down. So I'm going to come to the first cell underneath the last name, the last student name, and I'm going to create the row heading, which is sum. Notice it tried to type in a student name, so you always have to make sure that you're typing and selecting the word that you want there. All right, so I've typed the word sum. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change, since that is the only title that's going there. I'm not going to merge cells, but what I am going to do is highlight. I'm going to go ahead and create the borders around it so that I can see what I've done there. And so now I have borders and I have the sum row titled correctly. All right, now in order to add these together, I can do one of two things. I can highlight, make sure I grab the blank cell. I go over to auto sum, sum, and notice that it calculated for me. All right. Now, it has also placed a little bit of a arrow in the top left corner. Do you see this little arrow there? And when you click on that, you'll see a little kind of like a little warning. We can ignore that because it's not an issue on this. So I'm just going to click on ignore error, and then that way that little column, that little thing goes away. So again, I can do the same thing. I can highlight, make sure you're only highlighting that one column, picking up a blank cell, click on auto sum, sum, and we have it. And again, we have that little, so I'm going to click there again, drop down, error. Now, using the little technique that I showed you a moment ago, I can take and grab that little green square in the right corner, just of that one cell, and I can pull across, and what it will do is apply the formula all the way across that row. And so now what I'm going to do is highlight the row because I want to get rid of all those little error messages. And I can click into that. Well, it might be easier just to do, there we go. Highlight from the 16 over to 10, and I have the little drop down, and I can ignore the error, and then that's gone away. All right, so there are my calculations. I still want to center them so that they are uniform. So I go back and I center. So there I have my calculations for the sum for each item number going down the column. All right. So now what we are going to do is we're going to calculate the percentage, the class percentage, as well for each individual question. So in order to do that, under the word sum, I'm going to type the I'm going to type the words whole class percent. All right, now notice that this time the percent is kind of bleeding over, so I'm just going to go to the top here. I'm going to notice where my cursor is between the A and B. I'm going to double click, and that's going to provide the spacing that that wording needs. So that's a little quick thing that you need. All right, so what I'll do now is I will, as I've done before for the sum, I'm going to hold down my shift. I'm going to create that in black with white lettering, and I'm going to choose a border with white background. So click over and we see that that's taken care of. All right, so now that we've got our titles, we're going to put in a formula. And the formula that we're going to use is going to be an auto sum formula. And so the easiest way to do that is to click in the blank cell, click auto sum, and notice that it picked up that whole long line. Well, that's not really what we want to calculate, is it? Because it's picking up the item number. So the best way to do this, I'm just going to Control Z and delete that so that that formula is not there anymore. So the best way to do that is to just pick up the number 11, hold my shift key down, pick up the blank cell, go to auto sum, click sum, and that's not what I wanted it to do either. So let me type in here. In the blank cell, click on auto sum. Now I'm going to drag down. This is another way you can do it. You can just drag down so that you're not including what you want. You're only going to pick up this number 11 there. And now you have E23, and to the right of the parentheses, you're going to put a /. You're going to put an in count, and now the in count is the number of students. In this case, it happens to be 20 students. I'm going to put an asterisk and the number 100 again, and then I'm going to hit enter. And so now what we have is the whole class percent for this item. 55% of students answered item 1 correctly. So I want to apply that same formula again. So what I can do is just start here. I can hold down my shift, pick that up, come to auto sum. I can do sum, but I really want a formula there. So when I'm just in there and I see sum F23, then I'm going to come to the right. I'm going to do a /, the number of items, the asterisk, and the number 100. So you see I'm putting it up in this descriptive area. And then I hit the enter and it calculated it for me. So once I've got the formula correct, I can apply that formula by grabbing that little green square in the right corner and dragging it all the way across. And what that will do is apply that same formula, but to the each very specific column. So there I have my calculations of the whole class percent or performance on those items, each of those items. Okay. So now that I have that information, I also want to try to figure out how many females got that question correct. So the very same process that I used before, I'm going to type the word females. Now, just as a little bit of a reminder, I'm going to put the letter F here. And that's just to kind of help me to remember what they are. And so now we're going to use a different formula here. Let me go ahead and border this and create. So I'm creating the border with the white lining associated with it. So that's what we wanted. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I have them grouped by female. So what I'm now going to do is change my in count. All right. So in order to do that, you're only going to include female students. I'm going to click in the blank. I'm going to click auto sum. All right. So now that you notice, it's going to have a different formula. So what we really want the formula to be is not going to be E24 at all, this row. We want our rows to be picked up for row 3 through row 13. So I just simply change this E3 colon capital E to designate the column. And then I put all the way down to row 13. So I put the number 13. Now see how it highlighted it for me? Okay, then I go outside the parentheses. I add a /. And I'm still going to calculate it based on the total number of students. Excuse me, N is going to be the total number of female students. So we've already said that we had 11 female students, so I'll put the number 11, shift key, asterisk, 100, so it calculates and enter. And now I have that 45 students answered this question correctly. Now that I have the formula calculated, I can get rid of this little ignore the error. And now I'm going to grab that little green. I'm going to pull it across. And now I have the calculation for every single student. But in order to get rid of that little error mark, I highlight, I choose the little exclamation point drop down and ignore this error. So there's my calculation, my percentage calculation for female students. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do the very same thing for males. So we're going to type in males, put the designator M. And so in our box here, we will do auto sum. And now what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to choose row 14, E14. The E designates the first line that we have data on E14, and it's going to go all the way to E22. We don't want to pick up the sum or those things for that, right? I'm going to hit my right arrow one time, so I put my cursor outside the parentheses, put a forward slash, and now I'm calculating it based on the total number of males, which is 9. I do an asterisk and the number 100, and I click there, and so there I have the percentage. I'm going to go ahead and grab over, pull it over. Then I'm going to come back to this little drop down arrow for this, and I'm going to highlight all of those rows, choose the drop down, ignore error, so that it's nice and clean. Let me go back here and also make these black with the border of white. Now, one thing I haven't done yet is I have not yet centered my data. So I think that's what I'll do next based on what I've got so far. So let me do that. I'm going to highlight my information here. I don't want to center the row heading, but I do want to center all other information. So I put my cursor, hold down my shift, and then click in the bottom right corner cell that I want to center. Now that it's highlighted, I just choose center, and now everything is nice and centered on the page. So